Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology.
Karl Marx is often described as one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. His writings have inspired revolutions and generated centuries of fierce debate. Marx believed that capitalism, which was in its infancy at the time, had serious flaws. Marx claimed that in pursuit of profit, capitalists would encourage their ideology that work is good, leisure is bad, and material things will make us happy, embracing mass production, depriving workers of job satisfaction, at the same time exploiting the working class. Laying out the Marxist vision of a society where wealth is distributed evenly. Property is owned publicly, and education is free for all. Based on the theory of Marxism came communism, the realization of a stateless society where all are equal. Communism became a global movement, but the utopian ideal of a fair and equal society failed to materialize. Communism tyrannized and impoverished its subjects and slaughtered them in the tens of millions. Today, capitalism dominates the world. But many of Marx's criticisms have never been more relevant. Today, the global disparity between rich and poor is striking. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to the rich getting richer and the poor staying poor. He was right. He also predicted that capitalism would lead to boom and bust economics. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to globalization and that a handful of firms would have huge market dominance.
Because Marxism, in many parts of the world, is now considered to be a set of ideas, a set of practices that is over historically. It's not relevant anymore. Most of the people who think that associate Marxism with what happened in the Soviet Union in its revolution of 1917 and the 70 years of its history thereafter, and with other parts of Eastern Europe that were allied with the Soviet Union after World War II. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, and all of those socialist countries, that was their name for what they were, changed, went back to capitalism, if you like, it was thought, oh, well, they're the ones who talked about Marxism, so if those countries are not into that anymore, well, then I guess Marxism is over. That's wrong, folks. There's no nice way to say that. It's just wrong, because Marxism
is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him.
And now a hearing looking at the impact the Chinese government has on the U.S. education system. Witnesses from the state and education departments testify on Chinese government investments in more than 100 Confucius Institutes located on campuses across the U.S., which promote Chinese language and culture abroad. This is about 2 hours.
Over the past 2 years, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team, along with America's top intelligence agencies, have demonstrated one clear fact. The Russian government meddled in the 2016 presidential election.
New evidence of Russia's determination to interfere in our election. A bipartisan report from the Senate Intelligence Committee details how Russia targeted voting systems in all 50 states and warns the threat persists today.
Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it. Economy, foreign relations, defense systems.
The Justice Department now launching a criminal investigation of an apparent major Pentagon intelligence leak. Dozens of classified U.S. intelligence documents, most marked top secret, were leaked and posted online back in late February and early March. Most of those documents we simply cannot show. ABC has not yet authenticated the leaked documents, and we don't have official confirmation whether the documents have been altered. But sources say they expose the United States for spying not just on its adversaries, but also its allies, like Israel, South Korea, and even Ukraine. Experts say the leaked documents not only tell our enemies how the U.S. collects intelligence, but also contain clues that could potentially point to the sources and methods the U.S. used to obtain the information.
Traditionally, when banks get in trouble, you don't go out and shout it. You know, we're in trouble. They call their regulators, say, we got a problem here. Or the regulators spot it and they go in. And to prevent a bank run or panic, they handle it quietly. And the regulators will call around with other banks that are healthier and say, can we affect a marriage here? And that doesn't seem to be what's happening. And as a result, the healthy banks that would normally come in and help for a price, a fair price, and help the failed bank, the healthy banks, they're pretty smart. They're waiting. They're going, no, we don't want to come in too early. Let's let them go under. And then we'll come in and we'll get a great deal, and the taxpayers will have to guarantee all our potential losses. Can you look into that? Too long, but here's what I'm getting to. And this is not a criticism of J.P. Morgan or Mr. Diamond. I have great respect for both of them. But you know the deal they made is a good deal. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't have made a good deal for their shareholders. But the truth is, the deal was so good, if we still had white pages, you could open up the white pages, put your hand over your eyes, and pick a name and say, we're giving you this deal. And it would be successful. Because the taxpayers had to guarantee 80% of the losses. And somebody needs to look at that.
Senator, I'd be happy to come up and talk to you further about that, have my team come up and discuss it with you and your staff and see if there's a way.
But I want to talk about it in front of the American people.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can start by having a conversation in your office if you'd like. It's up to you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Steve Clemens, and I have a question. Is the world looking for a whole new order with less America in it? Let's get to the bottom line. Very soon, we're going to be looking at the Ukraine war in terms of years and not months. Despite losses here and there on the battlefield, the way Russia sees it, this is a vital war, and it doesn't matter how long it lasts. The alternative to Moscow is much worse. That would be living under the thumb of NATO and the United States and under their rules. Chinese power is bursting at the seams as Beijing attempts to widen its sphere of influence globally. When U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met last month, they said they were looking for ways to coexist, despite their many disagreements. So tensions, well, they're diminished for now. But are we witnessing a major shift toward a new world order? one that's not fully dominated by the United States. And what would that look like? Today, we're talking with one of America's leading foreign policy thinkers and writers, Richard Haass, president of the Council on Foreign Relations, and a former official at the White House, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Richard, it's always an honor to talk to you, but I just want to get some straight talk from, one of the smartest people in world affairs I know. Are we at the end of one chapter of American engagement in the world and the beginning of another chapter? What are your thoughts?
The short answer is yes, in part for reasons that are not directly about America, but they're simply about the world. There's two things that are going on that delineate this moment, Steve. One is the reemergence of intense great power rivalry. Many thought that had been put to bed with the end of the Cold War. Now the United States finds itself dealing with Russia, with China, and with two hostile medium powers, North Korea and Iran. And then secondly, we live in an age that, before this century's out, could ultimately come to be defined by these global challenges. We're just at hopefully the tail end of an infectious disease pandemic, but climate change obviously is happening and is going to happen with ever greater effects as this century unfolds. And then thirdly, there are things that are about us. We have changed in fundamental ways as a country, as a society. There's no longer a consensus about American foreign policy. Indeed, there's not a consensus about anything really anymore in the United States. We're far more divided than we ever were.
The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now.
Well, Venezuela remains in the grip of an economic crisis. A year ago, opposition leader Juan Guaido claimed the presidency from Nicolas Maduro, who's accused of election fraud and dictatorial rule. Now, meanwhile, Argentina, while it is in a deep recession and unable to pay its foreign debt of more than $100 billion. In neighbouring Bolivia, President Evo Morales was pushed from power in November, while in Chile and Colombia, protesters are demanding better governance and solutions to economic inequality.
President Vladimir Putin has reportedly spoken in recent days to the leaders of Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela, showing up support there for his invasion of Ukraine.
And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth.
We will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again.
I promise you, if I'm elected president, you're going to see the single most important thing that changes in America is we're going to cure cancer.
Work. It was a mistake. It was a mistake that I was a party to. I am not pointing the finger at anybody. I did that. I have to live every day with the consequences of the lost capacity to produce a rice crop in Haiti to feed those people.
To destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere.
Путешествий. за 1,5 часа